One of the first things that my midwife told me when I was pregnant is that it doesn't matter what you eat as long as you make sure you're getting enough. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name's Maggie Moreland and I am currently 31 weeks pregnant with baby number 1. And today I wanted to share 2 pregnancy nutrition myths that I have learned to be false. And I'm sure you've heard these myths because it's something that I feel like just goes with pregnancy. So before we get started, I want to preface by saying that I am not a nutritionist. I'm a certified holistic health practitioner and I'm extremely passionate about women's health and wellness, as well as my own personal health and wellness, and now baby's health and wellness. So what I will be sharing is my personal experience and what I have learned on my own journey. So myth number 1, you should eat for 2. I'm sure you all have heard this one, that when you get pregnant, you should double your caloric intake. Now, this is false. There are many studies and tons of research out there now that say that we should only be increasing our caloric intake by 200 to 400 calories when we are pregnant. So no, this is not an excuse to eat 2 desserts and 2 dinners and gorge yourself. I think it's really important, especially when we're pregnant, to be mindful of how much we're eating, because yes, we do want to gain weight as we are growing a little human inside of us, but there are also risks that come with gaining too much weight. And the way that we would gain too much weight is simply by overeating or excess calories. Now with that being said, I don't believe that we should be super meticulous about how much we are eating. And what I mean by that is I don't think you should be tracking your calories to make sure you're getting exactly 400 calories more than you were eating before. I believe that we should be eating when we're hungry, eating until we are full and satiated, and then stopping. And if we get hungry soon after, I think it is perfectly fine to eat again. And I apply that to when I'm not pregnant as well as when I am pregnant, because I think it's a good principle, because our body will tell us when it's hungry and when we need food. And I think it's important to listen to those cues, become familiar with them, because then the cues get louder and we can really hear them. I think it's really easy to obsess about calories on either side, like if we're getting too many or not getting enough. So like I said, I think it's really important to simply focus on eating when you're hungry and stopping when you're full. I've noticed for myself personally, as I have gotten more pregnant, and I'm sure if you're pregnant in your 3rd trimester, you may agree, that you can't eat as much as you could before. You're still hungry, and probably hungry all the time, as am I, but you can't eat as big of meals as you could before. I've noticed with myself that I have to eat smaller meals more frequently, and from what I've learned, simply because baby is getting bigger and our stomach is getting smaller. So no, we should not be eating for 2. We should not be doubling our caloric intake when we are pregnant, because baby really doesn't need a whole nother 2,000 calories. And by doubling our caloric intake, we can gain excess weight that can actually pose some risks when we are pregnant, like gestational diabetes, more difficult labor. Myth number 2, you can eat whatever you want when you're pregnant as long as you make sure you get enough calories. This is something that I heard at one of my first appointments with my midwife. And as a holistic health practitioner, I have some prior knowledge of nutrition and what we should really be eating. So this one I knew was false from the get-go. But a lot of women are told this by their healthcare providers. Yes, as I mentioned in the previous myth, quantity does matter. It is important how much we're eating. Don't want to eat too much, but you want to make sure you're definitely getting enough. But with that being said, quality is also important because all calories are not created equal. So, for instance, if you were to eat a 400 calorie processed cupcake as opposed to eating a 400 calorie meal with fruits, vegetables, a good protein source, and maybe a fresh beverage, you're getting a lot more from that whole meal and those 400 calories than you are from that cupcake. I think it's really important, especially as a pregnant woman, to make sure that we are not just getting enough food, but we are eating food that is nutrient dense and of good quality. Because what we're eating right now is the building blocks for our baby. Just like when we're not pregnant, what we eat is the building blocks for us. Now we're creating life inside of us, so what we eat is what is going to help build a healthy, strong baby. So my view with this is to try and eat a mostly whole food, nutrient dense diet. So not eating a lot of processed foods, additives, preservatives, things like that, and making sure that we're just eating whole foods. Whole foods for me are fruits, vegetables, animal protein like chicken, steak, beef, eggs, as well as whole grains and things like that, limiting the processed food. I think that we need to have some kind of balance in our life, and not saying that you should eat 50% processed food and cupcakes and things like that and 50% whole foods, but I also don't think that we should stress too much about and feel guilty about those times when we do want to eat a cupcake. But I think it's important to prioritize eating whole nutrient-dense foods as much as we can and adding in those other foods kind of as treats and less often. And I wanted to share, just at the end of my talk about these two myths, my 5 staple foods that I've been eating lots of while I am pregnant. I mentioned it just a couple minutes ago, but the first food is eggs. I eat a lot of eggs. Egg yolks also have a lot of folate in them, which is really good for the baby. So eggs are like awesome. In my first trimester, however, I really didn't want to eat eggs. Eggs really grossed me out. I didn't like the smell or the taste. But as I came into my second trimester, I was able to eat more eggs, and I love eggs. My second staple food is collagen. Collagen is a animal protein source, and it is kind of produced from the cartilage and things like that of animals, and it's really good for your hair, your skin, and your nails. And I've noticed that by eating this throughout my pregnancy, my skin, my hair, and my nails are really, really healthy. And with that being said, protein is really important when you're pregnant. Some people believe that you need 40 to 60 grams of protein. I tend to lean more towards 70 to 100 grams of protein when you're pregnant, because protein and amino acids are literally the building blocks of baby. My third staple food is fruit. Fruit is something that I have been able to eat the entirety of my pregnancy, and I love it. When I want something sweet, I really want fruit. So I love fruit smoothies. I love cantaloupe and strawberries and blueberries and all the fruit. And Luckily for me, fruit is pretty nutrient dense, has lots of antioxidants, and it's a really good source of carbohydrates, which is important. And thankfully, as well, it is the summer here, so lots of fruit are in season, which I guess could be the reason why I have been eating so much. I'm not sure. My fourth food is Parmigiano Reggiano. It is a kind of cheese that is aged a certain amount of time. I'm not sure. But it's Parmesan cheese and it's freaking delicious. It's also a really good source of vitamin K. And I don't really tolerate a lot of dairy very well, but I can eat a harder cheese like Parmigiano Reggiano, and it is so delicious. Some cheese and some fruit is my jam. And my fifth staple food, this is one that I could definitely eat more of, but it is a food that I have found to be really important during pregnancy, and that is bone broth. Bone broth is a really good source of collagen as well as glycine, which is something that we don't get from like muscle meat like chicken breast or steak. So it's really important to kind of balance out your intake of muscle meats as well as bone broth, because in nature we probably would be eating the whole animal with the cartilage and the collagen and getting a whole array of amino acids. And nowadays, I don't know about you, but I eat mostly chicken breast, so it's probably really good to have the bone broth to get the other amino acids as well. And again, bone broth is really good for your hair, skin, and nails, but it's also really good for gut health. It's also super easy to digest food, so I ate more of this in my first trimester when I wasn't feeling super well. It was just something that I could heat up really quick, put some salt in, and drink, and it was a good source of protein to get some calories in me. And with all that being said, all of those things that I love to eat and have been eating throughout my pregnancy, I wanted to share some things that I avoid. And I have actually avoided these things since before I was pregnant, but if you haven't, no worries. Like I said, I try to eat mostly whole food, nutrient-dense diet, and I try not to eat, or I limit my processed foods. And one reason that I try to avoid a lot of processed foods is because of all of the additives and preservatives in them. So some things that I try to avoid are artificial colors and sweeteners, as well as any type of gum or binding agent like guar gum or carrageenan. I try to avoid any meat or animal products that contain antibiotics and added hormones. Try to avoid any preservatives like citric acid. And then I also really prioritize avoiding anything that I can't personally pronounce. That's kind of like my rule. If I look at a food label and there's an ingredient and I have no idea how to say it, or I have no idea what it is, I'm like, okay, I probably shouldn't be eating that. I personally feel like nutrition in pregnancy isn't something that is talked about super often. Like I said, I feel like what you mostly hear are those 2 minutes that we talked about in the beginning of the video, and you don't really hear much about anything else. But I think that nutrition and what you eat while you're pregnant does play a significant role in the health of your baby, but also the health of you after you give birth to your baby. So I hope that you found this video helpful or just informative. And if you did, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel so that you can stay around for the rest of my pregnancy journey.